As Roman rule dissolves in Britain around the year 410 CE, a quiet but profound transformation begins. The Roman legions, once the spine of imperial control, are recalled to the continent. Roads crack, villas crumble. Urban life, so carefully structured, begins to retreat. What remains is a landscape of uncertainty, but also of quiet resilience. Into this changing world arrive new peoples, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes Germanic tribes from what we now call northern Germany and Denmark. Invited at first by local British warlords to help fend off raids from the north, they soon begin to settle, not as visitors, but as conquerors. The native Britons, descendants of Iron Age tribes and Roman citizens, are slowly pushed westward into Wales, Cornwall, and beyond. What follows is not a sudden takeover, but a long, uneven transition. Fields once marked by Roman milestones are now plowed by Saxon farmers. The Latin tongue fades. The villas become timber halls. Christianity gives way for a time to the pagan gods of the North Woden, Thunor, and Frigicoing across the heaths and moors. Life in an early Anglo-Saxon village is simple, intimate, and seasonal. Houses are small and sunken, with thatched roofs and wattle and daub walls. Chickens cluck. Smoke curls from a central hearth. The year is governed by the land by planting, harvest, wintering. Children help tend animals. Women spin wool and bake flatbread. Men hunt, clear woods, and build fences of hazel and ash. There is danger, always raids, feuds, famine, but also ritual and rhythm. Kinship is everything. Honor is tightly held. And though few can read or write, oral tradition is strong. Around the hearth, elders recite tales of heroism and sorrow. These stories woven into memory will one day give rise to the epic Beowulf, where monsters and mead halls, grief and glory, are joined in poetic song. By the 500s and 600s, the Anglo-Saxon world becomes more defined. Small kingdoms emerge across the land: Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, and others, Ziac ruled by a king or ealdorman, often chosen from among noble families known as the Nathas. Power is fragile, won as much through negotiation and marriage as by the sword. In the far north, the kingdom of Bernicia merges with Deira to form Northumbria, an early center of power and scholarship. In the south, Kent and Wessex grow under ambitious rulers who seek to unify the land, though full unification remains centuries away. Then, a quiet shift stirs the soul of the island. Christianity returns. In 597 CE, Pope Gregory the Great sends a Roman monk named Augustine to the shores of England. He lands in Kent, where he is received by King Ethelbert, whose wife Bertha is already Christian. From this simple mission, centered at Canterbury, the Christianization of Anglo-Saxon England begins. The old gods are not forgotten overnight. Shrines to Woden still stand in shadowed groves. But slowly, through conversion by kings and through the soft persistence of monastic teaching, a new faith takes root. Monasteries rise across the land: Lindisfarne, Jarrow, Whitby serving as centers of both worship and learning. Illuminated manuscripts, such as the shimmering Lindisfarne Gospels, are painstakingly copied by hand. Monks chant in Latin. Nuns teach young girls to read scripture. These quiet communities become beacons in the mist, where Roman memory and Anglo-Saxon energy merge. One figure stands out in this early dawn: the Venerable Bede, a monk of Jarrow. Around the year 731, he completes his ecclesiastical history of the English people, a work of profound insight and calm devotion. It tells not only of kings and battles, but of conversions, dreams, and visions. Bede gives us the very phrase Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, and helps shape a sense of English identity, still in its infancy. In the Anglo-Saxon world, law is personal. There are no police, no prisons. Justice is based on custom, compensation, and the concept of Vergilda persons, man price, paid by a wrongdoer to the injured party's family. For a nobleman, the vergild might be hundreds of shillings. For a peasant, less. Even teeth and fingers have a set price. The community gathers in the moot, a local assembly, to settle disputes. Elders speak. Oaths are sworn. The outcome is not perfect, but it is a shared ritual rooted in memory and the weight of one's word. Women in Anglo-Saxon society, though often silent in historical records, hold meaningful roles. Noblewomen manage estates. Abbesses govern large and respected convents, like Hilda of Whitby, who oversees both monks and nuns and advises kings. A free woman may own land, make wills, and sometimes even fight to defend her home. Children grow quickly. Boys learn to plow and throw spears. Girls weave, tend hearths, and carry water from the well. Life is short, but marked by strong bonds within families, within villages, within the rhythm of the land. By the late 700s, a new wind blows across the sea from the north. In the year 793, the monastery of Lindisfarne is attacked by seaborne raiders. Monks are slain. Treasures are taken. The quiet sanctuaries of England are no longer safe. The Vikings, skilled sailors from Scandinavia, begin a campaign of raiding and settling. At first, they strike coastal monasteries, but soon they seek land. Rivers become highways for longships. The Danelaw territory, controlled by Danish settlers, emerges in the east. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms respond unevenly. Some resist, some negotiate, some fall. Yet out of this chaos arises one of the most revered figures in early English history, King Alfred of Wessex. In the late 9th century, Alfred the Great becomes King of Wessex. He is not merely a warrior, though he fights with courage and cunning. He is a scholar, a patron of learning, and a man of deep thought. He believes in not only defending his people, but educating them. He orders the translation of key Latin works into Old English. He reforms the military, builds burhs fortified towns, and negotiates with the Vikings to secure relative peace. His vision is of a learned, lawful, and unified England, though full unity remains a dream. When we think of early medieval kingship, we often imagine iron and fire. But Alfred shows us another model, of a ruler as guardian of wisdom, a light in the long night. As we leave this chapter behind, the Saxon kingdoms have endured great transformation. From pagan migration to Christian mission, from tribal fields to fortified towns, England is becoming something new, a patchwork quilt of tradition and change, of faith and fear, of battle cries and soft chants in candlelit cloisters. Let us drift now into the next era, where the Viking threat grows, and a new royal house emerges from the quiet woods of Wessex. We drift now into the shadowed tide of the Viking Aegea time of both peril and transformation. Longships carve through misty estuaries, flames lick the edges of wooden towns. But through this turmoil, a new and unified English kingdom begins to stir, guided by a quiet determination and the enduring legacy of Alfred the Great. Alfred, crowned King of Wessex in 871 CE, stands at a threshold between collapse and endurance. The great heathen Armia, formidable Viking force, has swept across the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Northumbria has fallen, East Anglia lies broken, even mighty Mercia is fractured. Wessex remains the last redoubt. But Alfred is not just a warrior. He is a patient strategist. He rebuilds the kingdom's defenses, establishing a network of burhs fortified towns laid out on a grid, places of refuge, commerce, and administration. These are not just walls, they are beacons of a new kind of kingdom, one that endures not through might alone, but through learning and law. He reorganizes the army, creating a rotating service system so that at any time, one half is in the field while the other half tends the fields. And in the calm between battles, he translates works of wisdom Boethius, Augustine, Gregory the Great from Latin into Old English, so that even the common folk might read and understand. His preface to the Pastoral Care is a manifesto of quiet conviction. Knowledge, he believes, is not a luxury, but a necessity of rule. Alfred does not live to see full peace, but when he dies in 899 CE, he leaves behind the vision of a new realm, Angloland, a land of the Angles. His son, Edward the Elder, and his daughter, Ethelfled, known as the Lady of the Mercians, continue the work. Together they begin to knit together the fractured kingdoms into a single tapestry. Edward rules Wessex from 899 to 924, but in the Midlands, it is Ethelfled, Alfred's daughter, who becomes legend. Widowed in 911, she assumes leadership of Mercia, a rare and remarkable moment in early medieval politics. She builds fortified towns. She leads armies into battle. She negotiates with Viking warlords and Christian kings alike. In an age of warrior men, she governs with calm authority and tactical brilliance. Her daughter Elfwin even briefly succeeds her, though her reign is short, and male rulers resume control soon after. Still, Ethelfled's legacy lingers like a soft echo in the stones of Stafford and Tamworth, where her burrs still mark the land. In 924, Athelstan, grandson of Alfred, becomes king, and in him, the dream of a united England is realized. Athelstan is deeply educated, cosmopolitan, and politically astute. He conquers Viking-held York, secures oaths of allegiance from Welsh and Scottish rulers, and in 937 wins the Battle of Brunanburh, fierce and defining victory that echoes through Anglo-Saxon poetry as a national moment. He issues legal codes, patronizes churches, and maintains a court filled with scholars from across Europe. Charters are written, royal seals used, coins minted bearing his name, Ethelstan Rex Totius Britanniae King of all Britain. England, as a single political entity, is born not in a single stroke, but here, in the careful stitching together of people, customs, and lands under a single crown. As the Viking threat wanes, life in England stabilizes. Villages grow around churches and manors. The old tribal divisions give way to shires and hundreds, with reeves and earls administering justice and order. A typical English village consists of scattered timber houses with steep roofs, barns, fields, and woodland. The three-field system own field for winter crops, one for spring, one fallow brings rhythm to the year. The parish church becomes the center of communal life. Children are baptized. Bells call the faithful to prayer. Feasts mark the passing seasons. Plough Monday, Midsummer, Harvest Home. Language continues to evolve. Old English incorporates Norse words, sky, egg, knife, window. This blending reflects a deeper reality. Viking settlers, once enemies, now live among the English, marry into their families, and share in local life. As the 10th century progresses, the House of Wessex rules most of England, but unity remains delicate. Succession disputes emerge. Power is both personal and precarious. After Athelstan's death, his brothers Edmund, Edred, and Edgar rule in turn. Each faces challenges from Viking leaders in the north, but Edgar, known as Edgar the Peaceful, manages a relatively tranquil reign. His coronation ceremony, held at Bath, Abbey, becomes the model for English coronations even today. Under Edgar, monastic reform flourishes. Figures like Dunstan, Ethelwold, and Oswald rebuild and regulate monastic life, following the rule of Saint Benedict. The Benedictine reform restores discipline, expands education, and creates a golden age of Anglo-Saxon ecclesiastical art and literature. Manuscripts from this period, like the Benedictional of St. Ethelwold, glow with gold leaf, intricate borders, and figures of saints. These are not just books. They are prayers in paint and parchment, but peace is fragile. As the new millennium nears, Viking raids begin again, this time led by ambitious Scandinavian kings. Ethelred II, who rules from 978 to 1016, becomes known to history as Ethelred, the unready-not, unprepared, but from unread, meaning poor counsel. His reign is marked by indecision, failed diplomacy, and harsh measures. In 1002, he orders the St. Brice's Day massacre, a brutal killing of Danes living in England, an act that brings retaliation from Sweyn Forkbeard, King of Denmark. The kingdom begins to fracture again. Confidence wanes. Coins are minted with slogans like, "Peace to the land," yet peace remains elusive. In 1013, Sweyn Forkbeard invades. Ethelred flees to Normandy. And for a brief moment, England falls under Danish rule. Sweyn dies soon after, but his son, Knut the Great, returns. And in 1016, after the death of Ethelred's son, Edmund Ironside, Knut becomes king of all England. Though a foreign ruler, Knut governs wisely. He marries Ethelred's widow, Emma of Normandy, and rules with a blend of Danish pragmatism and English custom. His empire stretches across England, Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. He walks the beaches of Thorney Island, where Westminster Abbey will one day rise. He supports the church, enforces the law, and even undertakes a pilgrimage to Rome. Though a conqueror, he becomes a respected king. Yet his empire does not endure. After his death in 1035, his sons Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut rule briefly, but without lasting impact. In 1042, the English royal line is restored in the figure of Edward the Confessor, son of Ethelred and Emma. Edward is devout, gentle, and deeply influenced by his time in Normandy. He sponsors the building of a great stone abbey west of London Westminster and surrounds himself with Norman advisors. He dies childless in 1066, leaving no clear heir. And in that moment so quiet, so fateful, the seeds of the most famous conquest in English history are sown. As we leave this chapter, England has grown from a patchwork of tribal lands into a single kingdom scarred by conquest, yet alive with learning, faith, and tradition. Its fields are tilled by farmers who speak a blended tongue. Its churches glow with incense and candlelight. Its kings, both native and Norse, have forged laws and legacies that shape what it means to be English. But now, in the distance, sails rise again. Not Viking raiders this time, but something more. A claim to the crown carried across the Channel. In the next chapter, we will walk the foggy morning of 1066 and step into the footsteps of Harold, William, and a new Norman world. The year is 1066. A moment suspended in fog and tension. Edward the Confessor, King of England, has died without an heir. In his wake, 3 men lay claim to the throne, and as we drift into this crucial chapter, the winds over the English Channel whisper of invasion. Edward's death sets off a chain of ambition. His brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson, is crowned by the Witan England's Royal Council on January 6, 1066. A powerful noble, Harold is capable and commanding. But not everyone agrees with his coronation. From the north comes Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, who claims a distant agreement gives him the English crown. And from across the sea in Normandy comes William, Duke of Normandy, who insists that Edward once promised him the throne, and that Harold himself had sworn an oath to support him. 3 kings, 1 crown. The stage is set. In September, Harald Hardrada lands in northern England with a fleet of longships. He joins forces with Tostig, Harold Godwinson's estranged brother. On September 25th, Harold races north and meets them at Stamford Bridge, near York. The battle is fierce and exhausting. Hardrada is slain, and so is Tostig. It is a great victory, but a costly one. The very next day, word arrives. William has landed in the south. Harold and his tired men now march 250 miles in under 2 weeks, back across the length of England to meet a second invader. On October 14, 1066, the 2 armies meet near Hastings on the southern coast. Harold's forces form a shield wall, a dense, disciplined defense. William's army, composed of Normans, Bretons, and Flemish knights, tries to break it again and again. The battle lasts all day. Horses charge, arrows fall like rain. The Norman forces feign retreat, then lure parts of the English line into breaking. Finally, late in the day, Harold is struck perhaps by an arrow to the eye, as legend says, and killed. His housecarls fight to the end, surrounding his body. The English king is dead, the battle is lost, and William, Duke of Normandy, becomes William the Conqueror. William is crowned King of England on Christmas Day, 1066, in Westminster Abbey. But he is not yet secure. Rebellions flare in the north and west. Resistance comes from native English nobles, from Danes, even from Scots. William responds with harsh reprisals. In 1069–70, he conducts the harrying of the north, burning crops, homes, and villages. The devastation is so complete that generations later, chroniclers still speak of the region as desolate. But William also builds. Stone castles rise across the countryside, motte and bailey constructions at first, then stone fortresses like Durham, Warwick, and most famously, the Tower of London. These castles are not just defenses, they are symbols of Norman power. In 1085, William orders a grand survey of his realm. Across every shire, royal commissioners ask the same questions. Who holds this land? What is it worth? Who held it before the conquest? The result is the Domesday book, completed in 1086, a detailed record of land, people, livestock, and wealth. No document like it exists elsewhere in Europe. Its name speaks volumes. Just as no one escapes judgment in the Book of Judgment, so none escape inclusion in Domesday. For historians, it is a priceless window into life in 11th century England. For the ordinary English villager, life changes gradually, but meaningfully. Feudalism takes root more firmly. Under this system, the king grants land to barons, who grant it to knights, who oversee the peasants. Obligations run up and down the chain: loyalty, service, and taxes. The old Anglo-Saxon nobility is largely swept away, replaced by Norman lords. The English language, once dominant, becomes subordinate. Latin is used in church and law, French in court and nobility. English, however, does not disappear, it begins to absorb. From French come words like court, judge, beauty, courage. A new hybrid tongue begins to emerge. The Normans are enthusiastic builders not just of castles, but of churches. The old wooden Saxon churches give way to Romanesque architecture, also called Norman style. Thick stone walls, rounded arches, barrel vaults. Cathedrals rise at Canterbury, Winchester, Ely, and Durham, their high towers reaching into the sky. These are places not just of worship, but of memory and majesty. Monasteries are reformed and rebuilt. Monks from Normandy bring new customs, stricter rules, and continental connections. One figure, Lanfranc, the Norman Archbishop of Canterbury, leads reforms in education, clerical behavior, and liturgical uniformity. William rules firmly until his death in 1087. He is buried at Caen in Normandy, but his legacy endures in England. He divides his lands. Normandy goes to his son Robert, and England to another son, William Rufus. This division leads to decades of conflict between brothers, cousins, and rival claimants. Power is never certain. Kings rule, but barons grow bold. William II, Rufus, rules from 1087 to 1100. He is a powerful, often unpopular king killed while hunting in the New Forest, possibly assassinated. His younger brother, Henry I, seizes the crown quickly. Henry reigns from 1100 to 1135, strengthening royal administration and marrying a Saxon princess, Matilda, to heal divisions between Norman and English bloodlines. But Henry's only legitimate son dies in a shipwreck in 1120, the White Ship disaster. With no male heir, Henry names his daughter Matilda as his successor. When Henry dies in 1135, however, The barons crown Stephen, Henry's nephew. Matilda contests this claim. The result is a bitter civil war known as the Anarchy. For nearly 2 decades, England is torn. Castles are built, sieges fought, loyalties shift like sand. Chroniclers say, "Christ and his saints slept," a haunting phrase reflecting the chaos. Eventually, a compromise is reached. Stephen remains king, but agrees to name Matilda's son, Henry, as his heir. And so, as we close this chapter, England again teeters between division and unity. The Norman Conquest is more than a single battle. It is a transformation. Stone replaces wood, French joins English. The king rules from castles and governs through sheriffs, scribes, and surveys. But the heart of the land, the fields, the forests, the hearths of quiet villages still beat with the rhythm of older ways. 1,000 small changes begin to reshape the realm. And yet, deep beneath the surface, continuity remains. The seasons, the prayers, the stories passed from mother to child. We drift now toward the reign of a young king raised in France, Henry II, who will usher in new reforms, new conflicts, and the great legal traditions that still echo in courts today. It is the year 1154, and a new dynasty begins to rule over England, the Plantagenets. Their story is woven with ambition, brilliance, and blood. As we begin this chapter, we enter a kingdom rising from civil war, yearning for order. The boy who now becomes king is Henry II, son of Matilda and grandson of Henry I. Raised in Anjou and Normandy, he speaks French fluently, rides tirelessly, and governs with a sharp legal mind. Henry II inherits not just a crown, but a fragmented realm. His task is to restore authority, and he does so through law. Henry begins what historians call the Angevin Empire realm that stretches from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees. But his genius lies not only in conquest, it lies in reform. He strengthens royal justice. Sheriffs, once local appointees, are now agents of the king. Royal courts grow in importance, reducing the power of local lords. Henry introduces trial by jury, a process where 12 free men give a verdict based on evidence. He also promotes common law, a unified system that draws from custom, precedent, and royal decision. It is in Henry's reign that the phrase, "the king's peace," begins to carry real legal weight. But Henry's reforms clash with another source of authority, the Church. His former friend Thomas Becket is made Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162. Henry hopes Becket will support royal reforms in ecclesiastical courts. But Becket changes. He defends the independence of the Church. The conflict grows bitter. In 1170, in a moment of frustration, Henry cries out, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" 4 knights ride to Canterbury and murder Becket in the cathedral. His blood stains the stone floor. The realm is horrified. Becket becomes a martyr, and soon a saint. Pilgrims flock to his shrine. Henry, struck by guilt and political pressure, walks barefoot through Canterbury in penance. The Church has won a moral victory, but Henry's reforms continue. Henry's vast empire includes England, Normandy, Anjou, Aquitaine, and more. He rules alongside his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, a powerful duchess in her own right. But power does not bring peace. Eleanor supports their sons, Henry, the young king, Richard, Geoffrey, and John in repeated revolts against their father. By the time Henry dies in 1189, betrayed by those closest to him, he is exhausted and broken. His son Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, takes the throne. Richard is a warrior king rarely in England, but legendary abroad. In 1190, he joins the Third Crusade, sailing to the Holy Land to confront Saladin, the great Muslim leader. Richard's victories include the capture of Acre and the daring march along the coast to Arsuf. He does not retake Jerusalem, but negotiates safe passage for Christian pilgrims. On his return, Richard is captured in Austria and held for ransom. England pays heavily to secure his release, He returns, reigns briefly, and dies in battle in France in 1199. Richard's brother John succeeds him. His reign is troubled, shadowed by loss and rebellion. John loses most of the continental lands Henry II had ruled. Normandy falls to the French king, Philip Augustus, in 1204. The Angevin Empire collapses. At home, John's taxes increase. He clashes with the Pope, leading to England's excommunication. Nobles grow restless. In 1215, rebellion breaks out. The barons force John to sign the Magna Carta at Runnymede Charter of Liberties that limits royal power. It includes clauses on due process, property rights, and the idea that even the king must obey the law. Though John soon breaks his promises, the Magna Carta becomes a powerful symbol in English history. John dies in 1216. His son, Henry III, is just 9 years old. Henry III reigns for over 50 years, a long, complex period of relative peace and cultural growth. He rebuilds Westminster Abbey in the new Gothic style, pointed arches, high ceilings, stained glass. The Abbey becomes a place of royal memory. Henry is devout, artistic, and idealistic, but he also rules autocratically and favors foreign advisors, angering the English barons. In 1258, the provisions of Oxford force him to accept a council of barons. The seeds of parliamentary rule are planted. Civil war erupts. The rebel leader, Simon de Montfort, briefly controls the government and calls a parliament in 1265, including commoners. Though de Montfort is later killed, the idea of parliamentary representation takes root. Henry's son, Edward I, becomes king in 1272. Tall, fierce, and brilliant, Edward is known as Longshanks. He reforms the law, strengthens parliament, and focuses on conquest. He wages brutal campaigns in Wales, building mighty castles. Caernarfon, Conwy, Harlechto dominate the landscape. In 1296, he turns towards Scotland, capturing Stone of Scone and attempting to absorb the kingdom. But resistance arises most famously in the figure of William Wallace, immortalized in legend. Edward's reign is marked by consolidation, reform, and war. As the 13th century draws to a close, England stands more unified than before, but also more complex. The crown is stronger, but law now binds the king. Church and state wrestle for influence, while Parliament begins to emerge as a third pillar of power. The architecture of the time reaches for heaven, while the laws begin to ground society in justice. From the grandeur of Westminster to the marshes of Runnymede, from the thunder of Crusader hooves to the quiet ink of a royal charter, this age gives birth to English institutions, traditions, and ideals that will echo far beyond its time. We now drift into the 14th century, a time of plague, poetry, and political struggle. We begin in the year 1307. King Edward I, the lawgiver, the conqueror, has died. His son, Edward II, now wears the crown. Yet the new king is very different from his father. Edward II is affectionate, artistic, and prefers the company of favorites over the council of seasoned nobles. Chief among these companions is Piers Gaveston, a knight of minor rank whom Edward elevates far beyond his station. This favoritism causes immediate friction. The barons, jealous and alarmed, rebel. Gaveston is exiled, then recalled, and finally captured and executed by the nobles. This crisis signals deeper weaknesses in Edward's rule. Edward II struggles to hold his realm together. In 1314, he suffers a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Bannockburn, where Robert the Bruce leads the Scots to a decisive victory. Scotland remains beyond English control for another century. Meanwhile, discontent festers at home. In 1326, Edward's own wife, Queen Isabella, allies with her lover Roger Mortimer to overthrow him. Edward is captured and, in a dark corner of Berkeley Castle, secretly murdered, the first English king deposed since the Norman Conquest. His son, Edward III, just 14 years old, is crowned in his place. Though young, Edward III soon asserts his independence. He removes Mortimer, imprisons Isabella, and restores royal authority. But his ambitions grow larger still. In 1337, Edward lays claim to the throne of France, asserting his right through his mother's lineage. The 100 Years' War begins a long, bitter conflict that will shape English and French identity for generations. At Crécy in 1346 and Poitiers in 1356, the English achieve stunning victories. Longbowmen drawn from the peasantry devastate French knights, shifting the balance of medieval warfare. Edward's son, Edward the Black Prince, becomes a celebrated hero. Yet these triumphs are temporary. France is large, distant, and resilient. Even as war rages abroad, a more terrifying enemy arrives at home. In 1348, a ship lands on the southern coast of England, carrying unseen passengers' fleas, infected with the bacterium Yersinia pestis. The Black Death has arrived. Within months, the disease spreads rapidly. Symptoms include swollen lymph nodes, fever, delirium, and swift death. Entire villages are wiped out. Priests, doctors, nobles, and peasants alike succumb. By the time the first wave ends in 1351, 1/3 to 1/2 of England's population is dead. The silence in the fields is haunting. Bells toll constantly. Mass graves are dug. Life itself feels fragile, dreamlike. And yet, from this horror, change begins to stir. With so many dead, labor becomes scarce. Serfs and peasants are now in demand. Wages rise. Mobility increases. The rigid social order begins to loosen. Lords, desperate for workers, offer better terms. The manorial system, which had structured village life for centuries, begins to fracture. In 1351, the king passes the Statute of Laborers, freezing wages and forbidding workers from moving freely. But enforcement proves difficult. The plague has cracked the feudal bond between lord and laborer. In the midst of these transformations, Parliament begins to grow in significance. Originally a royal advisory body, it now includes two houses, the Lords, made up of nobles and bishops, and the Commons, composed of knights and burgesses. By the 1370s, Parliament is not only granting taxes, but demanding reforms. It begins to impeach royal ministers, question royal spending, and push back against tyranny. The Good Parliament of 1376 attempts to root out corruption. Though not all efforts succeed, the principle that the king is accountable to the people has been planted. Yet tensions continue to rise. In 1381, a new poll tax levied per person, regardless of income, sparks rebellion. In Kent and Essex, peasants arm themselves and march on London. Their leader is Wat Tyler, a charismatic figure demanding justice and freedom. The rebels storm the Tower of London, kill royal officials, and present their demands to the young King Richard II, just 14 years old. For a moment it seems that serfdom might be abolished. Richard agrees to the demands, but then Tyler is killed in a skirmish and the revolt collapses. Promises are revoked. Punishments follow. But fear lingers in noble hearts. The peasants' revolt marks a turning point. Though serfdom is not immediately ended, it begins a slow, irreversible decline. King Richard II matures into a cultured, enigmatic monarch. He embraces art, literature, and ceremony, surrounding himself with poets like Geoffrey Chaucer. Richard elevates royal majesty to new heights, robes of gold, elaborate rituals, and an almost divine conception of kingship. But his rule becomes erratic. He exiles rivals, raises taxes, and governs through favorites. In 1399, while Richard is away in Ireland, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke returns from exile and raises an army. Richard is captured and forced to abdicate. Imprisoned in Pontefract Castle, he dies under mysterious circumstances, perhaps starved, perhaps murdered. Henry Bolingbroke becomes Henry IV, the first king of the House of Lancaster. As the 14th century ends, we gaze upon a kingdom forever changed. The Black Death has scarred the land, yet also broken old social chains. Parliament has asserted its voice, and the people, peasants and tradesmen alike, have glimpsed their own power. Literature flowers. Chaucer writes his Canterbury Tales, giving voice to pilgrims of every rank. Art deepens. Architecture rises in soaring vaults and rose windows. But beneath this beauty lie fractures, dynastic disputes, economic tensions, and the lingering trauma of plague. We now drift into the 15th century, a time of civil war, royal ambition, and the flickering end of the medieval world. As the 15th century dawns, England finds itself not in peace, but in quiet unrest. The crown has changed hands. Henry IV, the first Lancastrian king, now rules after the forced abdication of Richard II. Yet questions linger. Is Henry's rule truly legitimate? The manner in which he claimed the throne by force, not inheritance, casts a long shadow. Henry IV, once known as Bolingbroke, is a capable but cautious ruler. His reign is plagued by revolts, the Percy Rebellion in the north, the Welsh uprising led by Owain Glyndwr, and plots among the nobles. He spends much of his time quelling unrest and defending his throne rather than expanding its glory. When Henry IV dies in 1413, he passes the crown to his son, Henry V, a young man known for his energy, charisma, and martial ambition. Henry V quickly asserts himself. In 1415, he launches a campaign in France, seeking to revive the dreams of Edward III and reclaim English rights to the French crown. At the Battle of Agincourt, on October 25, 1415, his outnumbered forces face a much larger French army. The English longbow once again proves decisive. Mud, terrain, and rain conspire against the French. Henry's stunning victory becomes legendary. He marries Catherine of Valois, daughter of the French king, and a treaty proclaims that Henry will inherit the throne of France. For a fleeting moment, it seems England and France may unite under one crown. But dreams fade quickly. In 1422, both the King of England and the King of France die within months of each other. Henry VI, just a 9-month-old infant, inherits both thrones. England is now ruled by a regency council, and as Henry grows, it becomes clear he lacks the strength of his predecessors. Gentle, pious, and bookish, Henry is deeply unsuited for the brutal politics of kingship. Under his rule, England loses ground in France. By 1453, only Calais remains in English hands. The 100 Years' War ends not in triumph, but in quiet collapse. That same year, Henry suffers a mental breakdown. In the vacuum of leadership, noble factions begin to maneuver for control. The conflict that follows is not a foreign war, but a civil one. Two great houses, the House of Lancaster, symbolized by a red rose, and the House of York, symbolized by a white rose, each lay claim to the throne. The Wars of the Roses, beginning in 1455, are not one continuous war, but a series of brutal struggles, betrayals, and shifting allegiances. Battles like Towton, Barnet, and Tewkesbury see immense bloodshed. Nobles switch sides, kings are crowned and overthrown. In 1461, Edward IV, a Yorkist, seizes the throne from Henry VI. Henry is imprisoned, briefly restored, and finally murdered in the Tower of London in 1471. Edward IV rules confidently for over a decade, bringing a brief calm to the kingdom. But his sudden death in 1483 throws the realm into uncertainty once again. His young son, Edward V, never formally crowned, disappears along with his brother from the Tower of London. Their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, claims the throne as Richard III, insisting the princes were illegitimate, yet whispers and suspicions mount. Many believe Richard had the boys killed to secure his claim. His rule is brief, turbulent, and haunted. In 1485, a new challenger rises, Henry Tudor, a distant Lancastrian heir living in exile. Henry lands in Wales and marches inland. On August 22, 1485, he meets Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. The battle is hard fought, But Richard is abandoned by some of his key allies. He dies in combat, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Shakespeare later imagines him crying. Henry Tudor is crowned Henry VII, the first king of the Tudor dynasty. He marries Elizabeth of York, uniting the red and white roses in the Tudor rosea, symbol of national reconciliation. With the Tudors, the Middle Ages draw to a close. Henry VII brings stability to a kingdom exhausted by war. He strengthens royal finances, curbs noble power, and lays the groundwork for a centralized monarchy. The printing press begins to spread literacy. Universities expand. New ideas from the Renaissance trickle in from the continent. The church still holds power, but reforming voices begin to murmur. A new world is dawning, and with it, a new chapter in England's story. And so, we return to the present, the soft edges of sleep gathering round us. We have wandered through the mists of early kingdoms, past Norman battlements, through the shadow of the Black Death, and into the fire of civil war. We have stood beneath cathedral arches, walked muddy lanes, and listened to the chants of monks and the clang of steel. This was medieval England, a world of ritual and rebellion, of faith and fury, of kings and commoners alike. As we leave this story behind, the past does not vanish. It lingers like candlelight on stone or a lullaby carried by wind across the fields. Let its echoes soothe you now. Close your eyes. Let the story drift into your dreams. Good night. This is not a tale told in haste or thunder, but a whispered voyage guided by candlelight and cool stone, by forgotten footsteps through cloister gardens and forest paths. Close your eyes. Let your thoughts settle. We are not rushing toward history. We are floating within it. The Middle Ages, also called the medieval period, stretch over 1,000 years, roughly from the 5th to the 15th century. But in England, we narrow our gaze slightly. We begin in the early 400s, as Roman legions withdraw and Britain becomes a patchwork of kingdoms and kin. We end in the late 1400s, with the rise of Henry VII and the dawn of the Tudor dynasty, a new age awaiting its own long tale. What makes this era so enchanting for sleep learning is its balance of the familiar and the forgotten. You may have heard of kings like William the Conqueror, Richard the Lionheart, or Henry V, but their stories stretch much deeper than battles and crowns. Here, we'll explore the quiet moments, how a village blacksmith worked by lantern light, how a cathedral rose stone by stone, how a nun illuminated scripture with gold leaf in the stillness of a scriptorium. We'll also meet characters who rarely appear in textbooks: the reeve, who managed the lord's estate; the alewife, who brewed the village's drink; the wandering minstrel, who spun stories at twilight for a coin or crust. Through them, we'll glimpse a world that was at once brutal and beautiful, chaotic and deeply ordered. Our voyage is divided into 6 chapters, each drifting gently forward in time, with soft transitions like the toll of a distant abbey bell. From the early Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we move to the Viking Age, then to the dramatic Norman Conquest, and the long heart of the High Middle Ages, a time of crusades, cathedrals, and the flowering of English identity. We pass through the dark woods of the Black Death and the Wars of the Roses before arriving at the quiet dawn of the modern era. Each chapter holds more than names and dates. You'll feel the frost of a medieval winter morning. You'll walk the uneven floor of a timbered hall. You'll hear the Latin chants echo in a great stone nave. And all of it will unfold slowly, like parchment unrolling by candlelight, measured, meditative, and meant for your deepest rest. As with all good bedtime stories, you don't need to remember it all. Let the names flow past like gentle rain. Let the voices of old England lull you. If sleep overtakes you before the final king is crowned, that's perfectly fine. This tale, like time itself, will be here whenever you return. And so, with the hush of twilight all around us, let us begin not in the clamor of war, but in the silence that follows the fall of an empire.